and members of the select board. Today is February 6th and 7 p.m. for our monthly or bi-monthly annual select board meeting, not annual. So as is customary, please stand and pledge allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. I think we'll have a quick one here this evening, right, Mary?
Nope.
Nope, I didn't think so.
Very big binder right there.
I can see that. We have Cumberland Farms, first on the agenda, a change of officer application. Will the attorney for Cumberland Farms please recognize themselves?
Hi, good evening. My name is Tyler Hensler from Upton, Devlin, here tonight on behalf of the applicant, Cumberland Farms of Massachusetts Incorporated. If it's helpful, I'll just summarize what is actually happening here and take any questions that you may have. So for Cumberland Farms of Massachusetts Incorporated, we are removing George Fournier as president and director and adding Caroline Tadelbaum as president. She is already an existing officer and director. We are then removing John Daly as assistant treasurer and replacing him with a Mark Rudnick. Then for Cumberland Farms Incorporated, the parent company of Cumberland Farms of Massachusetts, we are removing George Fournier as president and director and adding Caroline Tadelbaum as president. Again, she's already a director. There are going to be no operational changes. If you walk into the store tomorrow and the change is enacted on Wednesday, you're going to have the same experience on Tuesday than you would on Thursday. So nothing is going to be changing, and no more of the upper tier ownership structure is changing. I know it's a long chain in the application you have before you. There's a long chain of parent companies and subsidiaries, but these are the only two changes taking place at the Cumberland Farms of Massachusetts and Cumberland Farms Incorporated level. This is just a form the ABCC makes us file. So I'm happy to take any questions if there's any confusion, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions from the board? No, pretty straightforward. We need to take a vote.
Yep.
All right.
So motion just to approve the application for the change of officers and directors.
We have
So moved.
We have a first, second. We have a first and second. Any further discussion? None. And I call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Tyler.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda, Paula. Hi, Paula, are you there?
I am.
You're in the dark, Paula.
I'm in the dark. I'm having a little camera issue today. But
It's okay, no worries. So hey, thanks for joining us again tonight. So I believe you're here tonight because we're looking to vote. Is that correct? Do you have anything else you need to add?
only that up until the point in time that we had public comments were being accepted until the Friday after the last public hearing, the 23rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, the 27th was the last day for public comments, and none were received. So the activities that we're proposing for the grant are the same two that we discussed at the public hearing. And tonight I'm looking for the official votes that will allow us to proceed with filing that application and getting it done.
Okay, great, well, thank you. So here, the board, we have 3 motions that need to be read and approved and voted on. Do you have a copy of them? Would you like to take the first one?
You got it. Go. Make a motion to submit an MCDBG fiscal year 2022-2023 grant application in an amount not to exceed 1.35 million to include 2 activities: continuation of the Bellingham Housing Rehabilitation Program and accessibility improvements to Blackstone Fields. Second.
We have a first, we have a second. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, I call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries unanimously. We have a second motion.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to appoint Dennis Frayne, Town Administrator, as Environmental Certifying Agent.
Second.
First, we have a second.
That'll beef up that resume.
Any questions?
This just means that he gets to do all the signing of a lot of paperwork.
Good for him. We should give him a stamp, right? All right, thank you very much. Right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And our third motion?
Chair, I make a motion to authorize the Select Board Chairman and Town Administrator to sign all necessary documents required to submit the grant application.
Second.
The first, we have a second. Any questions? None. I call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, Paula, thank you very much for all your hard work. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. The hard work's just gonna start now. It's like, now we get to go actually write it. Thank you
All
very
right, well,
much.
thank you. All right, have a nice
Have a
evening.
good night.
Good night. All right, so we're moving along. So we have other business. Dennis, our Council of Aging legislation.
Yeah, Josie Dutel had asked Representative Soda to co-sponsor some legislation involving the senior center. So I asked him to get me a copy of the bill, so I see what it's all about. And Representative would like to co-sponsor, but only if the board's okay with it. In essence, what he's concerned with, if there were going to be financial ramifications or something of that nature, and you've got a copy of it. Clearly, it's sponsored by the Council on Aging Association for the state. And it's just some very minor language changes. The most significant is the final one, which says inserting in lines 9 and 10 after the words "as it may require" the following words: provided that if the council is an advisory council, the director may appoint staff and other employees as it may require, consistent with municipal needs. That's not the case for Bellingham. The smaller towns, that might be the case, but obviously it's not the case for us. But it's just some minor cleanup language to language that already exists regulating councils on aging. But you can see the whole thing there. It's very minor. So I don't see any reason why we wouldn't ask Representative Sort to go ahead and co-sponsor that.
Does this require a vote?
No, he just wanted to make sure there's no objection from the board, and I told him that we can't fill that. And he said, an email from me is fine.
Is there any objection from the board? Any
No.
question? No, I think we're good. then.
Yeah, I think it's a good process on his part, before he co-sponsors legislation that may potentially affect the municipality. Obviously, this doesn't.
All right, it's still on Norfolk County retirement.
So you've got the letter addressed to me from the county, and essentially the governor passed a separate piece of legislation in November that allows retirement systems to have a one-time 2% bonus to the annual COLA. The COLA is 3%, so it's a 3% cost of living allowance on retirees' pensions. And it's only applied to the first $18,000. So this 2% essentially is 5%. I'm sure it had to do with inflation and that type of thing. So they made it a one-time. The legislation is for 1 year. It talks about the impact on it on $18,000. It would come out to the extra 2% would come out to $360 per year. Essentially, what the county is doing, they're going out to all of the communities in Norfolk County. If 2/3 vote in favor, then they'll go ahead. So you've seen it. I mean, I really don't have an opinion one way or the other than, you know, it is a minor amount. It is.
It's in perpetuity though.
Yep, you're right. And it's not going to affect us this year, but moving, you know, they state that it's not going to affect our FY24 assessment, but certainly it's going to be paid for. So it will probably have impact next year. And as Mr. Connor said, it is in perpetuity. So it's just a matter of whether or not we want to sign on with that or not.
You said isn't, am I right?
Excuse me?
Isn't.
Is not going to
Okay.
increase our FY24 assessment. But, you know, obviously moving forward, it's an increase in cost. So potentially.
How many employees do we have on retirement?
That are in the retirement system, I don't have a number for that. But it's not going to affect us from that perspective. Certainly not this year.
But if, is there 200?
In the retirement system, absolutely.
May I ask a question?
Yep.
I'm sorry, there was. Mr. Connor just said in perpetuity, but
It's
right here
one-
it says
Yeah,
an additional 2% for fiscal year 2023.
yeah, but that $328 increases the base, so you'd own it forever.
Okay,
Yeah, so
So
that,
if we have 200 employees, which is more than, probably low,
yeah, I'd say that's probably
In retirement.
in the retirement system. I'm guessing it's 250 is probably a reasonable estimate.
okay, so at 250, that's $87,500 times 30 years, which is about a $2.4 million hit to us.
over 30 years.
But it's $87,500 a year.
I don't know that it's that simple a formula. I
Well,
can
that's-
find out.
Give or take,
Yeah, I don't think, it
That's
doesn't,
what I was doing to the United States.
yeah, I don't think it works that way where you just take the dollar amount and you multiply it by amount.
Well, if you took 2% on
Yeah, I don't think it-
18,000.
Yeah, you know what I can
That's
do
what
is,
it says.
we don't have to vote on this tonight. What we can do is go back and ask what the actual impact is dollar wise.
I'd like to know
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
sure.
I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot, but when you,
Yep.
When you break it down, the numbers on a larger scale, yeah.
You can make it look crazy if you did over 50 years too, so I mean, being realistic, we should be looking, like 5 to 7 years. We shouldn't be looking 30 years out. That just doesn't make sense, because like, world's gonna change so much in 30 years, I don't agree with that, but
But if someone retires at 60 and lives to 90, it's a 30-year hit for that.
not everyone's gonna have that same mortality, so there's gonna be, what's the mortality, 72 for
And
that?
what you've got to keep in mind is that the contributions from the employees are what fund the retirement system. It's not fully funded by the town's appropriation. So you're assuming that entire amount is on the backs of the community too. So, I mean, we can go and get a number and find out what that number would be and then go from there.
There's a state where this is like, have they done any of that forecasting?
No,
No.
we can certainly get it from the.
Look at mortality rates too, for men and women, and understand how many women are in our retirement and men, just to look at it. That would help.
The deadline for this thing to be,
All votes must be acted on by the appropriate board.
June 30th.
Year until
Yeah, we're
June
good.
30th. So we have plenty of time.
I think it's worth having a conversation. I
Yep,
agree.
absolutely.
We should look at it. I'll look at it with them. I think we can consider mortality rates and how annuities work, the whole bit is very similar, right? All right, next, we have January abatements.
did everybody have time to look at it?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept January 2023 abatements. Capital improvement charge $502.50, sewer $260.70, stormwater $216, trash $551, water $597.26, and grand total of $2,129.46.
second,
We have a first, we have a second, have any discussion?
What's a hose over?
I think a hose over is when,
silver-
I know
someone has a leak and they connect to the neighbor
neighbor.
and then they fix the leak and then people get abated. I think that's a hose over.
That's kind of the way it said.
Explain.
Several
Oh, did it
houses
explain?
were-
neighbor.
Oh, yeah.
Well, water service.
Is that the way he does it?
Yes, huh? Yeah.
All the little things you never thought you learned, but one day you do.
Interesting term. To me, I read it differently. at first. All right, so we have a first, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Both gifts and grant.
Chair, I move that the Board of Selectmen accept the gifts and grants as listed herein with said expenditures to be under the direction of the parties noted. $5,000 each to the police chief and fire chief. Malia family? Is that how you say it? Malia and Malia?
But that's great. Anybody have any idea where that comes from? Was it, in a will or something, or?
No.
No? If
Yeah,
it's private,
Mr.
you should say it.
No, it's a family, who is very appreciative and supportive of the police and fire department. This is not the first time that they've made a donation to those departments. And they.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Melia family. We have a first, we have a second, we have a first, we have a second. Any questions, anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, so before we have one thing that isn't on the agenda, but was added, we have a bid award we have to approve from John DiMartino. So if you're looking at your documentation, there is a motion there.
I move that contract 2022 HSHR Harpen Street Handicap Ramp Construction be awarded to the low bidder, Richard F. D'Ambrosia Inc. of Weymouth, Mass. The amount, and I know that Don explained it in his email, but it looks like $278,808 for base bid and $51,355 for the alternate bid total.
We have a first, we have a second.
Second.
We have a first and second. Do you have any questions or comments? Seeing none here, none. We call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. All right, Mary, you're up. Thank you. So, Mary's here to update us on the FY 24 revenue projection.
And I come bearing gifts.
Yay.
Are they color coded?
I've been waiting.
Can we,
Every year.
Ah, you are.
We didn't want to distract it. This is always your favorite meeting, right? This is like Christmas?
I was thinking about the first ones. I didn't even see when
We
they
love
bring
you
it
this
in.
afternoon. The method to our madness.
That's fine.
So just.
Like,
you to make me-
She was supposed to make you a co-host, so.
Her, presentation, her PowerPoint.
Okay.
Right. So. That's yours.
There you go.
Right,
We're good to go.
we'll go with this format. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. We did hand out a copy of the slides. If you have trouble seeing, then you can certainly follow along with the handout.
Wait, did you give those to me?
They just grabbed it.
Oh, they have them.
Yes.
Is there an extra one?
Oh, do you need one for the notes?
Thank you.
So good evening, everybody. Thanks for giving me a few minutes to go over some very important information with respect to our FY 24 budget. So what you have received tonight is the budget book that includes some information that we'd like to go over with you this evening and provide a high-level context to what is contained in that binder. We're going to talk a little bit about revenues tonight, and then we'll touch upon the expenditures. Then give you guys the opportunity to take those home, dive into them and start to go through, make your list of questions and figure out what other items you'd like to come back and discuss with us. But we wanted to just put a framework around that book before you leave tonight so that you understand what's contained in there. And so what you have, first of all, is a balanced budget for FY 24. Contained in there is, within the balanced budget is a level services budget that protects all of our core services that our residents and businesses have come to appreciate in our community. As well as this budget that is in front of you does include funding for some select board supported initiatives that include 2 additional police officers and 2 additional firefighters. So these were conversations that had taken place previously, and those have been incorporated into the FY24 budget. What you're going to see is that the budget before you represents a 3.8% increase. Our overall budget for the town of Bellingham, that includes both the general fund and our 4 enterprise funds, is an $80.9 million budget. The FY24 increase for that entire budget, again, general fund and enterprise fund, was 3.2%. But when you look at just the general fund component, it is a 3.8% increase. This chart here that I'm showing on the slide is contained in your budget book. There is a tab at the beginning called Summary, and you will see the 1-page budget overview. It looks like this at the beginning of your budget book. So don't try to write any of these numbers down or strain to read that chart. You do have the information with you. But let's talk about our revenues. So as we know, with the municipal budget, our revenues are limited in their scope as well as their variety. So we have 4 primary components that support our operating budget. We have our tax levy, which supports just over 73% or funds just over 73% of our general fund budget. We rely on state aid to fund just over 17% of our budget. Local receipts, things that we can either control or ideally maximize at the local level, the town level, supports just over 8% of our budget, and then all other funding sources represent just under 2% of our budget. So those are the 4 components that make up our revenue. For FY24, what that represents is a $2.6 million increase in available revenues to support our FY24 operating expenses. Make sense? Okay. So we'll get to expenses in a moment. Let's talk a little bit about our revenues. As we dive into each of those categories, and we start with our tax levy, which again is over 73% of our operating revenue. The tax levy is projected to go up at this point 4.15%. And I know that the obvious question that everybody always has is how come it's more than 2.5%? And the reason is listed below in this chart. So the tax levy can increase by 2.5%. That's the limitation of Prop 2.5, plus any new growth, which we at this time are projecting to include new growth, which represents a 1.19% increase on the levy, and any excess levy capacity that was left unused in the previous year. We did have excess levy capacity in FY23, and that is available for use in FY24. So when you add all of those up, you'll see that the tax levy is going to be growing by 4.15%.
Can you elaborate on the excess levy?
Yep. Can I ask you to hold that thought for 1 second? Because my upcoming chart will show it, and I can explain it a little bit better. Yep.
Question there. So what those 3 things, those what to the 2.6 million?
Yes, that contributes within the 2.6. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Everything that we're talking about here is inclusive in the 2.6 million. State aid, in terms of a revenue projection, at this point, the town of Bellingham is proceeding with a flat or a 0% increase on state aid revenues. If anybody followed along, the state held their annual revenue consensus hearing a couple of weeks ago, and that is the kickoff to the state's budget process. One of the key indicators that comes out of that conversation, so it's a conversation that takes place between the Commissioner of Revenue, the Secretary of Administration and Finance, the Treasurer, the State Treasurer's Office, and a number of other economists and officials, where they provide sort of a state of the state address and come up with their projections for the coming fiscal year, which sets the tone and the framework for the state budget process. Unfortunately, even given some of the robust economic climates and returns that we've seen in the past couple of years, they have come back with a very conservative revenue consensus number of 1.6%. In your chart, you'll see that I've included some of our prior years or the state's prior years revenue consensus projections. And you can see that in previous years, certainly much higher than 1.6%. That 1.6% What it means for us in terms of state aid is that the growth of 1.6% will be applied to just a portion of our state aid, not the overall $12 million that we receive, just the unrestricted general government aid portion, which is just under $2 million. So it's a very small, that particular variable has a very small impact on our state aid. The bigger impact will be once the state determines how they're going to fund Chapter 70 and whether they are going to utilize any of the new revenues that they are expected to receive with the millionaire's tax that was passed at the ballot box. And so they're still trying to decide. There have been no commitments made from the state at this point on how they are going to utilize those monies, other than to say that at least the House is only interested in utilizing them to fund new initiatives. My reaction to that is disappointment, because there are a number of existing initiatives, as we know, called unfunded mandates, that could benefit from additional revenue and support. So it remains to be seen how the state legislature is actually going to utilize those funds, and whether they are actually going to do it in FY24. Typically, when you generate a new revenue stream, sometimes you're a little conservative because you're not entirely sure what you're going to get for results. And so sometimes you can be overly conservative and not incorporate those into your current year's budget. Does that make sense? You guys are all shaking your head. Yeah. Okay. So we've got a very conservative outlook from the state at this point. The governor's budget this year is not due until March 1st. Typically, it's due by at the end of January, but with the change in administration, they are given an additional 5 weeks before they have to release their budget. So we're hopeful that we will have guidance from the state with respect to state aid prior to the workshop that has been established for this board on February 25th. The governor at the MMA show made a commitment to the municipalities to let us know that we will receive word from the state with respect to state aid funding prior to them filing their actual bill on March 1st. So we'll let you guys know as soon as we know. Local receipts. This is where we're projecting an increase in some of our funding sources, and I just want to give you guys an idea of what's happening. And for each of these items that we're talking about, again, at the beginning of your budget book, there is a tab called revenues. There is supporting documentation that will show you state aid historical numbers as well as local receipts. So you can dive into those and we can have deeper conversations if you want. Building gas electric permits, we know have been very strong here in the town of Bellingham for the last couple of years, given the development that's been happening. We anticipate that those will continue to be strong in FY24, but not to the level that we saw in FY23. The town has also entered into some solar agreements, and I just for impact wanted to show you guys the benefit of doing these types of business enterprises. We have 3 different solar pilot agreements in town that are considered a local receipt. And the total dollar impact for those is a very healthy $375,000 to support our budget. And it's made up of those 3 pilots that are listed here. We're also seeing some strong performance in meals tax. Again, the folks in Bellingham love to go out to eat, and we're seeing stronger returns in FY23 and anticipate that that's the trend that we are seeing in town is for that to continue. So we've increased those projections by another $75,000.
That information from the revenue tab, right?
It is, you bet. And we're also seeing strong performance in our ambulance receipts. So those are all contributing to our increase in local receipt estimates to support the budget. New growth. So as we talked about, the tax levy can be increased by Prop 2.5 as well as new growth. The town of Bellingham has seen some very significant new growth in the last couple of years. We are anticipating for FY24 a slight slowdown, but still higher than what had been the norm prior to this construction boom that we've been in. So right now we're projecting $625,000 in new growth. The bulk of that, at least half of that, is going to come directly from Curtis Apartments. But there are also some other projects that are currently underway that we will capture some of that new growth in FY '24, including Eastland Estates and some of the other developments that you guys have been talking about over the last couple of months. Some of those are multi-year developments, so that we'll start to see some of the new growth come online in FY '24, but there are others that will sustain our new growth going forward into '25 and '26. So at this point, 625,000 is a fairly comfortable estimate for new growth, but we won't know those final numbers. As you guys know, we don't know those final numbers until the fall. Because all of the data is being captured at this time through June 30th. And then we do all of our sales analysis over the summer, and then we certify new growth in the fall. Okay. And lastly, this budget will be, we're proposing to utilize the pension reserve fund to support some increases in the pension assessment for FY '24. We'll talk about that in more detail when we get to the workshop and go through some of our expenditures. Okay. So switching gears a little bit to talk about operating expenses. Again, this is from the one-page summary that you have in the beginning of your book. Overall, general fund operating expenses are projected to grow 3.8% or $2.6 million across these functional categories of general government, public safety, education, public works. These are the traditional groupings that are promulgated by the state for municipalities to capture their spending patterns. What I've done, and this is an eye chart for you, so you don't think that you have to memorize this one, but what I wanted to show you is in terms of the overall 3.8%, what we do is we need to take a look at our budget from a holistic or very macro approach when it comes to identifying where we have revenues to be allocated. The very first step in the process is to identify fixed costs. Our fixed costs include things like our health insurance, our pension assessment, Medicare, the employer's share of Medicare, as well as all of our insurances, our property and casualty insurance, and our debt service. Those items make up our fixed costs. And for FY '24, those costs are $17 million. Once we know what those fixed costs are, then we know what we have remaining to be allocated across all of the other departments in the town. So the FY '24 budget that you have in front of you includes the breakdown that you're seeing here for town departments versus school departments. Does everybody see that? All right, so I didn't want to go into too much detail on this particular chart, but I wanted to give it to you, give you an opportunity to take that home and take a look at it. And when we get back together, we can answer any questions you might have on that. Okay. All right. Dennis, do you want to jump in or do you want me to?
Sure.
You want to, on what's included, not included? Yeah.
So some of the things, we had a lot of requests from departments. Council on Aging would like additional staff, Inspectional Services would like additional staff. There are multiple agencies. I know finance officers could use some additional staff, but they're not deal breakers for those departments. We're able to maintain with the staff that we have. So there were a lot more requests that were never even included in departmental budgets. You'll see that the fire and police increases are the greatest. And that has a lot to do, two things really. We didn't settle contracts until after the fiscal year started, so you have kind of a double impact there. But the positions that we added, we were able, if you remember, to fund the increases for the police department without adding any funds to their budget because they had vacant positions in there that had been funded in their budget, so we didn't have to increase them. The money was there. A lot of those positions now have been filled. They have 4 recruits scheduled to go to the academy in April. So this is a fully funded police budget with 2 additional positions, which brings them up to, we'll say, full manpower. It's basically where they were at before we started making cuts. So that's why you see such an increase on the police budget, in addition to the changes that we made contractually. Fire department also shows 2 new positions. funded. Those have not been filled. The two new and the police have not been filled yet either. As I say, they're awaiting academy. Same with the fire, awaiting academy. So those are funded. Additionally, we have two positions in the highway department that are proposed. Whether or not we're able to afford those remains to be seen. You're going to have them recommended as part of the budget that you have at the budget workshop, unless there's a dramatic decrease in in general government funding from state aid and chapter 70 money. So those are part of your budget. The other thing that is not included, or one thing that is not included, is the full increase that we had within the DPW budget for roadway improvements. We cut that, I believe, by $100,000. So that was taken out. Let's see what else was taken out. A few other minor items were cut back, reduced. We're looking at making our OPEB contribution from free cash potentially, as opposed to budgeting it within the operating budget, which we had done last year. So a lot's going to have to do with when we get our cherry sheet numbers to see if, in fact, the governor has talked about maintaining the increases that we saw last year and committing to those, fully funding the programs that they funded last year. If that happens again this year, I think we'll be in decent shape, and hopefully there'll be some increases. Obviously, there was a refund this past year, so the state obviously did quite well as far as collections go. Whether or not we see that with the cherry sheet remains to be seen. Right now, we're projecting no increase, but we're not projecting a decrease either. In some of the past years, our offsets or our charges have gone up dramatically. Specifically, the charter reimbursements haven't been what we wanted them to be, and of course,
They're terrible.
obviously.
Terrible.
The thing that killed me every year from folks at this table.
Exactly. And just, I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
The
interrupt.
offsets are close to $4 million on the cherry sheet right now, but our cherry sheet charges are, so they're considerable.
And in this budget, in the revenue projections, we've got a conservative projection for those assessments. We are hoping that that these have leveled off. And so those assessments have only been projected to increase 3.5%. But again, to Dennis's point, it remains to be seen if the state does in fact fully fund the Student Opportunities Act that they had funded midway through this past year, then we should be in good shape. But if we're still seeing a dramatic influx of people leaving Bellingham and going over to the charters, and they don't fully fund it, then that may have an adverse impact on our budget.
Can I ask a question too about BBT? I know we've talked about this in the past. I see that number for BBT and I heard this is anecdotal. Are the numbers decreasing of the number of students that we're sending to BBT or increase?
They had been decreasing. I don't know where it's at right now. So I don't know what the expectation is.
And I know that we're a 13th part of it.
Right.
I get all that. That's what's
Part of our public school.
I understand that completely, but if you were to take us compared to a Milford, where Milford might send 200 students and we send 100 students, are we paying the same amount of number as Milford is paying that we're paying? I'm just wondering. I think I know the answer, but
There's a formula. The more students that we send, the higher our assessment.
okay.
In addition to the capital costs, we have a share of the capital.
Well,
costs.
that I get, but so there is a formula based on the numbers that
And
are
it's state driven. I mean, the state provides, that's why they can't really give us our assessment until after they get the state aid figure.
But to your point, Don, the enrollment for the last couple of years has been increasing at BBT very slightly. They're at 72 students. Last year it was at 70. The year before was either 68 or 67. So it's a couple of students per year. But as Dennis was saying, a big part of the formula is driven by the release of state aid information, because what happens is every school in the Commonwealth, whether you are a private public school, regional, vocational, the state calculates what's called a foundation budget for every one of the school districts, and that's the minimum amount that they need to spend to support education. In addition to calculating the foundation budget, they also calculate minimum contributions by community. And those minimum contributions are what have been driving the increase in the BBT assessment. The minimum contribution is the amount that the state says and calculates how much we have to fund to support that school district. And we have been seeing that that has been going up because the formula for calculating a minimum contribution uses a lot of wealth statistics from the community, property valuations, as well as income statistics. And we're seeing positive trends in that area. So the state assumes we can afford more, and therefore, when our contributions go up for education, that is built right into the assessment.
I will say we peaked at about 110 students
I
about
remember
before the eighth grade went up to the high school. Yeah, we were over 110 students, so the numbers did drop. Yeah, they, once the eighth grade went up, we thought that would be back to the school. Well, that's kind of a big picture. The municipal budget really hasn't changed a whole lot as far as positions go. The positions are the ones that we've talked about, plus the two in the trying to back up whether or not we're able to realize that or not remains to be seen. It is in the budget at this point.
Are there any further questions? Thank you. This was very helpful. This is great.
Excellent. So I would just encourage any one of you, if you have any questions regarding the information in the binder, please feel free to either contact me or contact Dennis. We'd be happy to sit with you guys to go over any questions in anticipation of the workshop. And, you know, looking forward to a robust dialogue on the 25th of February. Thank you.
Awesome.
That's a question, right? Looking at the school budget. The numbers match up. When we had the Prop 2.5 override. 1.5 million, the increase in the school budget was $1,530,000. And the following year, it was unchanged. And if we had been giving the school department a 2.5, Prop 2.5 override number, we should have been given more money than the $1,500,000, and we didn't.
Okay, you made a statement of assuming we would give the school department a Prop 2.5 override.
Well,
What does that
if
mean?
we increase their budget proportionately from year to year. When we increase the budget by the $1,500,000 from the override. Theoretically, if it was equal to the previous year, we would have given 1.5 plus 600,000. We didn't. And then for fiscal 22, we had no increase. We stayed at the roughly 27,878,000. And then we jumped up 886,000 last year. So when I looked at the numbers for the budget, if we take out the override percentage, our 5-year average without the override is a 2% increase versus the 5-year average with the override is 3.2%. And it seems from a distribution to the Bellingham School Department versus BBT, that percentage has been significantly less than Prop 2.5. Maybe I can bring my numbers in and we can go over it separately,
Sure.
but this is the information given to me by Pete. And I'm just trying to rationalize the numbers over a 5-year span. When you factor in 2.5 plus new growth. And I realize some of this is decisions we made.
And also it includes the COVID years when the schools were getting an influx of funding to do a lot of things, and additional funds weren't, I mean, we were giving them everything they needed and they were turning back, you know, quite a bit of money. To the point where they were actually able to fully fund the.
At that time, we also established it was our recommendation that the school department establish that special ed reserve and fully fund it. Revolving fund, there's, you know, $480,000 in that reserve fund right now. But I would love to sit down and go over that with you, Michael. Yeah.
Will we have a school sheet for the 25th because it's empty right now?
So not from us. Because well, let me qualify that. I can't speak for the school committee. So they are currently working through their budget process. They had a workshop on Saturday, just past Saturday. And they have another one scheduled for this coming Saturday, where they're working through all of their departmental meetings, the meetings that Dennis and I have already had with the town departments here. So it depends on when they will be ready to release it. They do have a budget book that is out. It's a 207-page budget book. If that's what you're looking for, we can certainly get copies made available for you. If you,
I
Yeah,
can-
even emailed, I think
On the website, by the way, if you want, you can download it, but I told them no. So I actually grabbed a copy Saturday.
Mhm.
And Joanne said she would have copies made for us if we want. But just so you know, I was there Saturday, and the one thing I asked very specifically was that we want the select board requests at least 1 week in advance of that workshop final document. So we have an opportunity to review before the 25th, and they said they would do their best to have that to us. Because last year and years before, they show up and we're getting them that day or the day before. And I just don't think that's right for us to sit here and try to make a decision and ask questions when we're just getting information. So I made that point. Peter heard me, Joanne heard me, Mike Reed heard me. I said, we need this a week in advance. So shoot for the 18th to get us something.
Same should apply to the police and fire
I
department.
agree with I agree. I
I
mean,
don't think
that's,
we should consider it if they walk up and hand us.
that day
handouts.
of. No, I agree.
Yeah, I just think if we're having a workshop on the 25th,
We should have.
we need at least some
Just-
line items for every, and I know
So
they do their own.
Yeah.
correct,
But
yep.
you
So
can't
do
look at
you
a whole
want
budget
copies of
without-
their 207-page book, or do you want just the executive
have-
summary?
I mean, I would
An
like the
executive
book.
summary.
Well, that's.
If it exists now, we can email it to you.
Yeah, and because then with email, I can download it. and read it.
I'd like to have a copy of it if everyone's gonna get it. Just something I would like to read to know.
I started reading it, the summary.
And I don't know what.
I met with Pete, so I have the executive summary, but again, if we're going. through
Even
the
if we
whole
can have the
budget, I think
executive
we need
summary,
to-
that would be helpful. Starters.
Okay, and just a reminder with respect to school department budgets, under Mass General Law, the town has very, very limited ability, almost no ability to affect the school department budget. Chapter 71, Section 34 states that the school department's budget is the authority of the school committee.
That's how it is in our bylaws.
Yeah, so just-
That's exactly.
But there's one thing I think that's worthwhile. I mean, having set up the special ed reserve, if you look at the minimum funding requirements plus the excess, it's a question of whether pressure needs to be applied to dip into those reserves.
What excess are you referring to?
If a student were to come into the district and it creates a flux in the schedule, the minimum funding requirements for mainstream students versus special ed students has been, we've been getting closer to the minimum funding requirements over the last few years
In terms of
versus the total budget.
minimum funding, are you talking about the foundation budget that's set by the state?
Yes,
Well, town of Bellingham still spends above net school spending.
Agreed.
So we are spending in excess of our minimum contribution for net school spending.
but it's been on a declining basis. If you were to
We
look
have-
at the spread.
Potentially.
Yep.
But that argument could also be made across other departments as well.
I found it interesting, its commentary, that sitting at the meeting on Saturday it was well done and I thought it was standing, I learned a lot. But when individuals get up and present their budget, they use the word cut. Nobody cut their budget. They basically asked for something and said, we can't afford it within this budget. So that's not a cut. That's a request that basically got denied. And many people use the word cut interchangeably. A cut is, here's our budget, it's $80 million and listen, it's only gonna be 78 million this year. We're making a $2 million cut. That's a cut.
I would differ slightly because
Okay.
if you look at the contractual obligations over and above last year's budget. The amount of funding that the town is giving is less than the minimum contractual requirements. So departments had to make cuts on non-staff or staff levels. And that's where some of the perspective comes in. I believe the contractual requirements of the school department are in excess of 1.1 million. And the amount of money that the town is funding is less than 900,000.
But when you look at the
But-
overall budget, though, you see an increase year over year, and we're 3.8%, what were we last year? So we said, hey, we've increased it to a certain amount. We didn't go from 3.8% to 2% this year. It went from 2 point whatever to 3.8%. So I guess we cut programs, but you have to move money and be creative. What I heard Peter in the school committee say, listen, there's money there. We just have to be creative. Maybe there's some services that we don't need. Maybe there's supplies that we don't need because we can get it somewhere else. I mean, that's what I heard. I heard the school committee asking the department heads to just be creative, but I didn't see any cuts per se. And Michael, I'm not as entrenched into it as you because you work in the school department.
Well, I mean, I think you
understand
can
that, but
use,
what I
you
heard-
can use Woburn as an example that we just saw on TV. And that they've all of a sudden have negotiated 12% increases, or Franklin negotiated 444. Those decisions were not made appreciating what the town was going to contribute. They just assumed that they'd get the money, and it creates an environment where the school department has to cut to get back to the budget that they've created.
I won't pretend to know what went into the negotiation
Either,
for
I
the
have
town of
no
Woburn.
idea. It's what I heard.
But I mean, something on TV, I mean, it's
You know.
unfundable in a Prop 2.5 world.
You don't know what access they have to other reserves and other local receipts or any other funding sources.
But we're not here to debate the school.
Right.
You know, again, it's
Exactly.
not in our purview. It really isn't. When you look at it, it's not within our purview.
All right,
Right, and the intent of tonight was just to simply show you, demonstrate for you what our revenues are. And our revenues, at this point are $2.6 million. So it becomes a matter of how do we allocate that? And Dennis and I have spent time with the town departments. We've taken a look at our fixed costs and provided the recommendation that you have here before you tonight. May I ask a question?
It's, and I understand their budget's not within our purview, but it is within our purview to give them more money to fund it or take funding away,
You make a recommendation.
or allocate recommendations for allocation. So I think that's where it gets.
But it's not as a select board, it's not us like the school committee to tell Dr. Morano, you need to cut a science or whatever. That's their responsibility, right?
Correct.
But if they come to us and say, we need, like they did a few years ago, we need an additional 1.5 million. So we supported a Prop 2.5 override. That's our responsibility to work with the school. If they need more money for something, absolutely.
If they come forward and class sizes are in jeopardy, or there are programs being limited, great. Maybe we don't hire those 2 new firefighters, maybe we don't hire those 2 new policemen. We don't hire those 2 new DPW directors. Those are the decisions that you
That's why
have to
I
make.
think it's a
Yeah.
bigger
We
conversation.
come back on,
Yeah.
I mean,
It
that's
is, for
the
sure.
conversation.
I mean,
And certainly, you're right in that you don't pick and choose as far as what programs, but if they come forward and say, you've got 1.1 on the table, we need 1.3, or we're not going to be able to have a certain program that we think is very important, then it's a matter of trying to figure out how to add funding.
Like we don't get another police vehicle, or we see if we get 1 more, 2 more years, useful like that. Great.
I think that's what you've been saying all along, Michael, right? Is instead of rubber stamping, this is the kind of conversation.
Comes
we
back to
wanna be
these
having.
discussions. I mean,
Yeah.
But
so
we've had discussions.
I know we'll cover later, but the 600,000 additional pension liability or reserves, I mean, what's driving that decision? Why are we on the hook for $600,000 more?
So I'll go through that. It's in your budget book. You can see the assessment numbers and the supporting schedules, and we can go through that at the workshop. When we talk about expenditures.
It's not something that we have a lot of choice in, given that number.
We don't, isn't it mandated? To a certain degree.
Yeah, it's our share. I mean, communities can't come out and say, no, we don't.
We're not gonna give it.
I just thought we were on track for 2029 based on a particular number, and now it's up.
Well, it's not based on,
Well, that would help us understand the details behind that as well.
Didn't do as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and what plays into why did the number go? I just heard over here that the investments didn't do really well, so now
I'm sure that's.
one affects all of us. Right? I don't know what your 401k, but mine certainly didn't go up.
People have gotten taken to calling them 101Ks now.
I added 2 years of to my retirement.
Yeah.
I gotta work 2 more years.
I got a long way to go, Don.
Well, I mean, 2 on top of when I plan to retire. I had a plan and that plan's changed, unless things change.
Exactly. All right, so hopefully that gave you a little bit to mull over and chew on as you got to
All right, thank you.
dive in here.
Any further questions before we're just about done? I don't, is there anything else, Dennis, on, do you have a report? you wanna share
Assessment
with
center
us?
went very well on Saturday. We talked a lot about that. We're getting into the fire assessment now. We won't hear back from civil service probably for at least 3 weeks as to the rankings of the candidates, but that'll be the next communication we have. Civil service will provide us the listing of the candidates and participate in the assessment center and the civil service provides that candidates be chosen from the top 3 as well.
Remind me then, when that's all done and we're presenting the top 3, what's our responsibility at that point for you to hire?
Essentially, the way that would work is I would interview the 3 candidates and make an appointment and submit it to the board. That's my responsibility as far as making the appointment with select board ratifying. However, in a position like this, where we've only had 2 chiefs in 40 years and I'm going to be retiring in another year or 2, I don't want to leave you with a, yeah. Maybe you don't feel.
Amazing and
Yeah,
crazy at the same
what I
time.
would look to do is screen the 3 and bring forward, you all have the resumes and I'd like to have the board actively participate in this. I don't think
I
we
would
want
like
to
that
get
as well.
involved with the 5 interviewing particular candidate, but there'll be a process involved and we can get, you involved in it. I think it's important. And as I said, we've had 2 chiefs in 40+ years and I think it's a big decision. Hopefully whoever we select will help.
When will the posting for the assessment center for fire chief go up?
It's not as, we've started talking about it, obviously, where it's not a civil service issue. It's much smoother. We don't have to go back and forth with the civil service, have them approve the posting, et cetera. So it'll probably be in a couple of weeks. June 14th is what the chief has given as his date of retirement. I think I gave you a copy of the letter from them.
Yeah.
So we've got some time there. Obviously, we'd like to make a decision by the early May, so whoever we select. All right, and the only other thing is, we did have, we appointed an assistant director, a DPW director. I know I sent out some information to the board members. We didn't reach an agreement. I thought we had reached an agreement, but unfortunately, that person has declined the position. So we have another candidate, very strong. I know I've spoken to some of you about it. I have copies of the resume. And I would like to bring that forward at our next meeting. If we can do it sooner than 2 weeks from now, I'll send out an email, see if we can do a quick Zoom meeting or something to get this done. I think it's important that Dawn's retiring and it would be good to have whoever it is, give you a 30-day notice. This individual, a strong background, has worked with some of our administrative staff in the past, and I think can do a good job at it as well. Get your copies of that resume, as I said.
Dennis, I'm a little confused. I thought, she was agreed upon. Isn't that?
Yeah, it was. She opted to, she backed out.
There was nothing signed.
Yeah, nothing was signed. I can tell you that's never happened. We've got to the point where.
See the email.
Yeah, I know.
I thought that was kind of a little done deal. I mean, it is what it is, but just I'm just saying,
We ratify,
Yeah.
and then we go back and they say, now we're, second thoughts and not to take the
Yeah,
position.
they had accepted the position. We had agreed on salary.
Who knows?
Yeah, the person, yeah, it's unfortunate, but I think we have a very strong, candidate. Bring forward.
So can you share that with, you guys looked at it?
I'm gonna give you a copy. of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we won't act.
I
on
know
it
you said you
tonight.
talked about it.
Yeah. Nope.
All right.
That's all that I have. Anything else? Before the board, no?
No, so right now, technically, our next meeting is the workshop, unless we can get a,
Yeah, we can put
Zoom
something together
something,
quicker.
yeah.
I'd like to put
Yeah, if we
something
could,
together.
please do.
We can do it via Zoom. Yeah, everyone's satisfied.
Excellent. All right.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion, we have a first, we have a second. All right, hey, I've never done this. Motion adjourned, meeting adjourned.
all those in favor say aye. Aye.
There you go, Kelly. There you go.
Yeah.